Week 9 of the college football season is up this weekend. Week 9. How the hell is it week 9 already? PFI College Football Show. Michael McQuaid, Conall Diggin, Dara Carger, and he's not here because his team won the Champo in Armagh. Now, Conall, the last time I checked, Cross McGlenn won the proper championship in Armagh. So what's he doing? Do you reckon he's lying to us?
I mean, all I'm saying is there really an Armagh championship if the team that Derek Carragher is part of can win it? That's the real question.
A big congrats to his team. I'm not going to name them and embarrass him, but I know he's having a very good week. And this guy here deserves a week off at some point as well. As I said, Michael McQuaid and Conall Diggin. You can use code folks Ireland 15% off home field apparel. Check it out. Please check it out. Secure the bag. We're going to talk college football in a second, but I feel like we need to talk about Michigan State for a second. Just very briefly. There are obviously things going on. We haven't talked about this off camera, so I can see your face here. There's obviously things going on with Mel Tucker, and we're not going to get into that. But did you obviously seen what happened on the scoreboard at the weekend? Yeah.
I don't know if I have, but you maybe just jog my memory and memory of.
Let's just say there's an NFL game in Germany next weekend.
Oh yes, no, I know. Yes, I know exactly what's happening. Yes.
How did nobody get fired for that, Conall? Please tell me. Like, what's going
on? I don't know. I feel like that's one of those things where they were like, someone was like, they had a question in place, but they were like, hang on, this can just be our placeholder question. And then they got to like a minute before the actual question came up, and they're like, oh, we don't have a new graph available. I guess we just have to throw this one. It's literally the only reason why that could happen. But that was not great. If you want to look up what happened, look up what happened. It's in a way it's like it's like place wrong time. It's the best way to describe it.
I'm loving it. I'm also loving the Wi-Fi in Kerry. We're definitely going to go local this week. Don't worry, that will make sense to you soon. It's all good. Anyway, Conall, let's jump in. I guess first off, just because it's us two, is there any we're going into 9 weeks here now. Is there any way you can sum up the season so far? Is there anything that you've really enjoyed so far this season? Because it's been so up, so down, but it has been quite difficult to sort of guess what's going to happen in a lot of these games because there's been so many storylines every week, man.
I think what's really stood out to me this year is how close everything has been. I mean, we currently have, 6 teams in the top 6 who are, unbeaten so far. You have a bunch of teams who have only one loss. I mean, Oregon State are 11th in the country right now. Ole Miss are 12th in the country. Utah 6th. Like it's incredibly close. There's a lot of really good teams, but I think what makes it even better is there's no standout team at the moment, and I think that makes it even more interesting for us because you could talk about, oh, this team's going to make the playoff, but then in a week or 2 weeks time they'll lose a game and you'll be like, well, they shouldn't make it. But then you look at everyone else and you're like, oh, well, maybe they have been one of the best teams. So it's really difficult to say, but I think that makes it even better, and I think we had a lucky year to start making this.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting season, and I guess I've been writing a lot of stuff for Notre Dame for an unnamed newspaper, and I've just really been focusing on them a lot this season. And we're not going to talk about Notre Dame in this episode, but the fact that there's still a lot of optimism now when they're not going to make the college football playoff is it just sums up college football. But they've got a really big game this weekend against Pitt, so I'm really intrigued to see how the Irish come off the bye. It feels like only yesterday we were sitting in the Aviva, so time will tell. And publicly acknowledge and thank Dara and thank Conall, there you go, for coming on this podcast, because Dara is in my head. Collie Hanna, man, on the rip. Kerry jersey, man. Interesting choice of attire.
Yeah.
Do you just wear one every day, or what's the crack?
Well, I was wearing it today, and I just thought, you know what, I was wearing a jumper over, but I thought, for the podcast, we needed some. I know Dara's after winning his championship, but I need to show everyone, this is only club championship. You need to, when you get to the county level, it's a different level altogether.
Finally, before we get into these games, I asked a friend who's going to the Broncos for the first time ever this weekend from the UK. Oh, mate, you should totally go to Folsom Field and see the Buffs. They're playing UCLA this weekend. No, they're not. they're playing in California. I wasted this time for 2 hours trying to find tickets. So there you go. Anyway, on the week 9, it's hard to believe it's week 9. I keep saying this, but and thank you, Conall, for picking out some of these games, because sometimes if you focus on a couple of teams, it sort of you can sort of go off what you're doing. Looking at Oregon against Utah, this is a really important Pac-12 matchup on Saturday. If you look at Oregon's loss a couple of weeks ago, I think they were playing Washington, but how they came back against Washington State, 38-24, 6-1 in the season. Utah are also 6-1, but their starting quarterback Cam Rising is not going to play the rest of the season. He's got an ACL injury, so it's going to be Bryson Barnes at quarterback. You've seen how they played last week against USC, 34-32, and the fallout from that. I have to say, I'm quite enjoying the memes at the minute from a perspective number 1 draft pick. Maybe he might not have to have his sheet out and start picking certain teams at the minute. But look, Oregon's offense is ridiculous, Conall. And look, Utah's defense has been absolutely fantastic. Who's going to win this game? Give me the magic ball answer.
I guess this is the best way I can put this is Utah's defense is absolutely amazing, but Oregon's defense is also absolutely amazing. And I think, looking at the two teams, I mean, Oregon's offense is one of the best. Like, they have one of the best passing offenses and rushing offenses. I mean, they get this season over total, they've had 6.8 yards per rush. Oregon have, and they have 21 rushing touchdowns, which is 4th in the nation. Last weekend, Bucky Irving had, over 100 and something yards for 2 weeks in a row, 40+ yard rushes, one for a touchdown, one he was cut down just short. They've beaten like some really good teams already. The game they lost, they easily could have won if it weren't for some maybe 4th down decisions, which, I'll always usually stand with the coach when it comes to 4th down decisions, because it's like, hey, if they did win the game off them, no one would have any problem with it. And then Utah had a massive win at the weekend, and it was really a kind of coming out party for them, with their offense, scoring over 30 points this weekend, and then, holding that, vaunted USC offense as well, which was really, really important for them. And I think the most interesting thing from that game was actually they had a wide receiver. Their leading receiver was Sione Vaki. He had 149 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he's a safety. Because they have so many injuries on offense. He's been playing running back for them. He's like their 3rd leading rusher. He was playing wide receiver. He's played some snaps at safety and everything. And they're doing all this without their starting quarterback. They've also now lost their best linebacker in Cody Barton's brother, Lander. So he's going to be out the rest of the year, but he's going to be really good when it comes into the draft. And they have Cole Bishop, who I think every time I've talked about Utah, I've talked about him because I love him. He's just an amazing safety. He just gets turnovers and he absolutely whacks fellas in the open field. But, I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, but Oregon's offense, I think, is much, much better than Utah's. And I think they can, even if they get shut down in one way, they can expose them in another way. And I just think there's no way they don't. Not that there's no way they don't win it, but it will be. I think I'd be surprised if they didn't win, is the best way to put it, even though Utah are so good.
When you say a low-scoring game, you think it's going to be very low? Like defensive?
Like maybe like a 13, like 20 type of game. Very comparable to the Ohio State and Penn State game at the weekend. Like not a boring game, but like a bit of a grinder type of game.
I'll tell you one game that's not going to be boring. It's going to be Georgia against Florida. Like, look, you could argue that the SEC has got some of the best rivalries going. Look, the Gators probably don't have a team, Conall, that can really compete with Georgia on paper. They're the number 1 team in the country. That being said, though, Georgia have not had, like, you could argue, very difficult games this season against very difficult opponents. They've just sort of breezed through this season. They've had a bye week. They're 7-0. I think Georgia are 88. They've won nearly 90 games under Kirby Smart. I've written down they're 52-9 in conference play. But you have to, people talk about the NFL and say any given Sunday, any given Saturday here. How would you rack this in terms of like, Georgia and their offense are they're third in the country, but Florida are 46th. So outside of the general, Florida and the Gators need to put up points against Georgia. How do they win this game whenever Georgia just seems to storm through opponents? It seems like that sort of game that could just get away from Florida early. But it seems like that sort of game, if Florida can stay in the game defensively, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, and Florida will be coming into this being like, we kind of already have a bit of a head start because Brock Bowers is not going to be playing in the game, and he's been mentioned as a generational type tight end. Like, he could go, if this was a draft. I don't think that's too out there to say that, but like, he's absolutely amazing, and he's kind of carried this team at some points in the year as well. But it puts a lot of onus, I think, on the receivers to step up. Like, there's not been, a real standout outside of Bowers this year. And then, the running backs, they get the job done, but again, there's been no one who's really had to step up. And Carson Beck still hasn't been properly tested against, a top quality team. And, maybe Florida aren't, the highest quality, but they're not a bad team. And they have a really good defense. They bring a lot of interior pressure with Princely Umanmielen.
It's a
He's
very good attempt there. I have to give it to you.
Yeah, he leads the team in sacks, and he's more than likely a day two, second or third round pick in the draft this year. But just to get on to Florida, they've been doing pretty well recently. I mean, they beat a ranked Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, which was the last time we talked about them. They have Graham Mertz at quarterback, who's actually put up really good numbers. After transferring, he has over 250 yards in his last 4 games. They get good running backs in Mentrell Johnson, and they have Trevor Etienne, brother of Travis, who we've seen play, and we obviously know what Travis Etienne can do. So it's a strong team. I think they have some, the top quality players on this team. There is a bit of a gap between, the middle kind of type of guys on this team, and obviously, Georgia is kind of stacked top to bottom really with talent in every single position. And even though they haven't shown it properly this year, like, they're still the much better team. But I do think next week, when we talk about them, because we will be next week, they play Missouri. I actually think there could be a chance, depending on how this week's game goes, that they could lose to Missouri. That's just me putting it out there, a week in advance.
Oh, I hope Dara's here to talk about that next week, big time. Right here, let's roll on the Big Ten football, because I feel like sometimes we don't give Big Ten enough love on this podcast. Remember, we just talked about Colorado for 4 weeks every week.
It might be because there's 3 good teams.
Yeah. Well, for now.
Yeah, next year should be fun, because it's just going to be the good Pac-12 teams.
Can you actually imagine the crack whenever this playoffs expanded? Like, we're going to be going mad. Like, there'll be no sleep for about 3 months. So we got Ohio State against Wisconsin. So Ohio State's number 3, Wisconsin, big Big Ten matchup. Ohio State moved to 7-0 overall, and a perfect 4-0 in Big Ten after beating Penn State in, frankly, what you could describe as a marker down last weekend. They're going to play a Badgers team that's 3-1 against Big Ten teams so far. The Buckeyes are staring down Michigan here, but they're going to have to get a few more things going first. Cal McCord had nearly 300 yards and a touchdown last week against Penn State. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a standout game, 170-odd yards on the day. But Wisconsin had a massive, massive comeback to win 25-21 against Illinois last week. 18 points scored in the fourth quarter. Locke, the quarterback, who was taken over as the starter after the guy broke his hand last week. 240 yards, 2 touchdowns. This is going to be a really sort of offensive juggernaut of a game. I'm really intrigued to see how both teams come out. I think Wisconsin could take Ohio State close. Am I mad? I see your face there. Why not?
I think the only way they keep it close is if it is a low-scoring game. But I think fully subscribes to this of we're bad if we're not on offense, it's completely fine if we're absolutely amazing on defense. If you're really good on offense but only average on defense, if your defense gets off to a bad start or you give up a couple points, like then you're playing catch up the entire game. But if you're keeping the score low and the offense isn't clicking properly, you're like, well, now we can just make a couple adjustments and we're still only one touchdown away instead of 3 touchdowns away. And I think that's really what has helped them this year. I mean, especially at the start of the year, the offense wasn't, what it has been the last couple of years. And, in the big games they've had against Notre Dame and Penn State last week, the scores were low, but they were clearly like that defense last week. I mean, Penn State only had one first down or one third down conversion the entire game, and that only came the last 2 minutes of the game. Like they were absolutely amazing in like defensively, just this whole season, but especially last week. And obviously, if you have Marvin Harrison, who is arguably the best player in this draft. I mean, it depends on how much we're gonna flip on Caleb Williams, after even last week wasn't a bad week, but considering his Notre Dame performance really, but it's really like they're just a good football team. It's like that. There's no other way to describe it. And I think, they have a good matchup here with Wisconsin. I mean, they came off to kind of a slow start. They lost, I can't remember what game it was early on, but it was a game they should not have lost. I think it might have been to an Arizona or something like that. But they have their new head coach, Luke Fickell, who was a coach at Ohio State, played at Ohio State. Like he's been one of these guys that if something ever did go wrong with Ryan Day, like him and probably Marcus Freeman are like the two guys they're eyeing up to be the next guy to step in there. And it's not been the best start, but they've kind of righted the ship now. They're only one game out of making a bowl game. They have the running back Braylon Allen. He came into college when he was like 17 or 18, started straight away. He's been starting for 3 years now. He's absolutely amazing. Like I think when he gets to the NFL, he's going to really impress some people. But it's going to be fun to see. Like they've lost probably their two hardest matchups this year, and I think the rest of the year they should be fine. It's just what happens in this game. I think they do lose, and I think Ohio State, probably do run away with it. I'm not gonna, knock your choice of team, but I think they are just like Ohio State. I said it, I think last week. I was like, I just think they're at a different kind of level, from your Penn States. Even if they're like an absolutely amazing team, they're more ready for challenging. Is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I should know why I think they might take him a wee bit closer. And maybe upset. I'll leave it at that. It's 14.5 in the spread. So I'll say no more. We'll see. Who knows? Any given Saturday, or in our case, any given bloody Sunday, because it's on at 2 a.m. This is the best week of the year, Conall, because the clocks go forward for us. It's going to be a good week. And we'll actually get to watch Sunday Night Football in the NFL, the good time, even if it is the Bears against the Chargers, which would put you to sleep. I have to say, man, I did laugh a wee bit when I seen Colorado pop up on this.
Yeah, I did actually find another game we maybe could have talked about. I think
was it Duke?
No, I cannot talk about Duke for one more week. Last week's game that was actually good. They were leading Florida State, but I can't keep talking about if Riley's back, they might. And he was back, but then he got injured just before halftime again. So lost like handedly in the second half of that game. It's Oregon, Arizona, because Arizona, I think they're like 4-3 this year. But if you look at like their 3 losses, it's all against like I think it might actually be like a USC, Oregon, Washington, something like that. They did them all like extremely close. So it could be they're losing to good teams, but they're playing them close, which I think is good for them.
When I hear the words Arizona, I think, man, they're playing late. And that's as far as I'll go there for that now. I'll stay in Colorado for a second. Yeah, there's no Duke talk this week. UCLA, Colorado. It's at the Rose Bowl, iconic Rose Bowl. Dion is really getting around this year, man. UCLA are 5-2. Colorado's 4-3 after losing a few games. Look, UCLA is probably the favourite to win this game. But the Buffs have shown the ability in certain games, not just to play well against good teams, but to really put it up against good teams. We've seen how Dion's son, Shedeur Sanders, has played. He has got, I think, over 20 touchdowns in the season, over 2,500, almost 2,500 yards. And UCLA, the Bruins have won the last two meetings between the Buffs, and you would expect Conall, UCLA to win this week. But it's funny because Chip Kelly, for people listening to this, Chip Kelly, obviously former Eagles head coach back in the day. I feel old now, man. But he's already said, like, he's not going to sit here and say that Garbers is going to be the quarterback for UCLA this weekend. He's happy to see sort of a situation where there's different guys playing. He's got Garbers, he's got Collins. I've got it written down here, Collins Shalee, but also Dante Moore, the freshman as well. So time will tell to see what happens there. But you would expect, this is well, the Bruins could be in the Big Ten next year. The Buffs could be in the Big 12. So this could be the last game for a long time between these two. We got to enjoy it while we can, man.
Yeah, and I was looking through UCLA's team, and they are kind of like an old style, like maybe not even like typical like Chip Kelly type team. Like they play amazing defense. Like they have a top 10 defense. They're second best run defense in the entire country. The last 3 years, they've had 8 wins or more. Like they're probably gonna do pretty well. Like for the foreseeable future, I think they obviously have Dante Moore, who hasn't had the best start to his college career, especially like against ranked teams. He's not done particularly well, but he's only a freshman. He was like the 4th ranked player in the entire country. Like, so there's clearly, something about him, and they have one of the best running, attacks in the entire country as well. And they're kind of like your typical like college team, play really good defense, run the ball well. If you need to open up the game with the pass, they can do that. I mean, last week, Ethan Garbers went like 20 for 28, something like that, had over 250 yards. So even if something doesn't work for Dante Moore, like they can bring in Garbers and be fairly confident that he can do a job, especially against the Colorado defense, which we know all too well is not going to hold you to a whole lot of, is not going to hold you back a whole lot. Like it's going to kind of let you through a little bit and hope that they can play catch up. But I didn't have a whole lot written down on Colorado. I mean, the last game they played, they're coming off a bye week, was against Stanford, which if you watched up until halftime, which a lot of people did because it was very late in America, they were like, okay, they're going to win. They're up 29-0, and then ended up losing in overtime. So it just wasn't. It's not a. It's a great time and not a great time to be a Colorado Buffaloes fan. You have all this hype around you, and I see a lot of hate kind of coming in for them because of all the hype that came in earlier in the season. I think it's more, people like see they actually weren't that, but they can be good. They will be good in the future. But it's just one season, it's hard to turn around. A team, like even if it is an entirely team, like they can't mesh that quickly. So I do think with Shedeur Sanders, like he does chance, especially if this game becomes a shootout. But I want to pinpoint UCLA. Ty Latu, he's like an outside linebacker, edge rusher type. He is amazing. Like he's 6.5, 2 fumbles and an interception. Just like one of those guys who can like bend on the edge, but he's like the power to like still like he can kind of do any of the pass rush moves that you need him to. Like he's going to be a first rounder this year. So if you're watching this game, like watch out for him. See how many times he can sack Sanders, because he takes a lot of sacks because this offensive line isn't great.
I have to say, I think you're bang on what you're saying about Colorado, but they've exceeded so many people's expectations this year. Even if people have been like, it's almost like the Taylor Swift situation in the NFL, but for college football, people are sick of listening to it.
Yeah, like I'm at the start of the year in the kind of pick, like it was again like this mad thing to pick them out to improve, but I did say they have a good chance to be getting 6 wins, but they're more than likely not going to get, like it will be a bit of a long shot to get them to 6 wins. But I was like, they can get 4 or 5 wins, which they already have now. That would be a perfectly acceptable season. I think maybe just the only thing that damaged their reputation was that they got those 4 wins, or they got 3 of those 4 wins right in the first 3 weeks of the season, and it kind of maybe blew proportions a little bit.
let's wrap this up with I think we're gonna go Texas BYU to wrap this up for this week. Obviously, it's hard to believe, man, we're in week 9. Hardly we're already finishing this podcast. Texas, 7th in the nation, 6-1 in the season. They lose to Oklahoma a few weeks ago, but the thing is, the Longhorns have not looked as good as they did since that game in Alabama 7 weeks ago. BYU 5-2 in the season. They got Slavis, the main man. They started 3-0 with Big 12 teams. I guess the big question as we look at this week and wrap up this week, Conall, is will the Longhorns continue to churn out the wins, or will BYU's 74 ranked offense go to Texas and pull off a big win? Send us home.
So I guess the one thing that BYU will take from this is that Quinn Ewers more than likely isn't available. I think he hurt his elbow, shoulder, so it's going to be Malik Murphy playing this game, and he started last week, had a pretty good game, but it is kind of, we'll wait and see more with him, because there's not been anyone other than Quinn Ewers to pass more than 10 times for this team. Like Murphy's played has made 8 pass attempts all year. Like even in garbage time, they're still throwing out Quinn Ewers. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they do. They have a top 20 defense, which will, has carried them, especially in a lot of those close games, most notably the game. Really bad attack, like they're like top 30 in rushing and passing and top 15, I think, total yards this year. So I think it'll be fine even with a quarterback. BYU, like they've just joined the Big 12 this year. They're 2-2 in the conference, which is better than all the other teams, the new teams who are 1-11 so far in conference play, which is not great. Caden Slovis had a really good year. Came in, he was recruited by USC, had a really good first year, and then fell off after that. Transferred to Pitt, didn't have a good year at Pitt, replacing Kenny Pickett, and then has come in now, had a fairly solid year. Like, not something that would absolutely blow you away, but he's very good. And it's just one of those where you were one of those programs where they're good every 3 years, kind of in the mid that 3-year kind of cycle, where they're going to be fine. Like they're going to make games, but they're not going to blow anyone away and have massive, draft, guys coming into the league next year. But they're good enough. I think they'll challenge Texas. I think they'll give them a bit of a game early on when they kind of trying to figure out like what Malik Murphy can do. But if Texas shuts them down on offense, like they win this game, I think fairly easily.
Oh, nice. Nice. I like it. Conall, thank you so much, man. And people, if you're watching, listening, use code Ireland for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. This has been the PFI College Football Show. Week 9 done. We'll be back for week 10 next week. Let's see if Dara joins us. But for now, Conall, thank you very much, my man. Appreciate you up the kingdom. And I'll chat to you